Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. Joining me once again, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is you and I just watched the first episode of Echo, finally getting around to that. So we're going to do an episode on the first episode of Echo, aka Chafa. And then, maybe depending on how we're feeling, we might circle back around next week with a more like full season kind of breakdown, but we'll go from there. Why did we pick this one? Catching up on kind of the post holidays, post like best of 2023 stuff. Obviously we did Percy Jackson stuff. We did the Marvels last week. So we're just kind of still catching up on some of the stuff that hit, either during the winter or the December break where we were doing all the holiday stuff, or just stuff while we were still kind of on hiatus, I guess. The history lesson on this episode, / all of Echo, as these were originally released January 10th, 2024, or January 9th, depending on time zones and whatnot. They have a runtime between 37 and this episode in particular, 51 minutes per episode. This is the longest of the season as they kind of fill in or reuse some Hawkeye stuff to kind of like give you a little bit more backstory if you're just coming into Echo here. In the Marvel TV timeline, this is going to sound exactly the same as when we did What If a couple weeks ago. We had Secret Invasion June through July of last year. Then we had Loki Season 2 in October and November. What If Season 2 hit end of December. We had Echo here all on January 10th. And then everything in the future of the Marvel TV verse. I guess they did announce... X-Men, the X-Men 97 animated stuff coming March 20th today as we were recording this. But in the like MCU version of things, we have Agatha Darkhold Diaries coming out TBD, maybe late 2024. We have The Eyes of Wakanda coming out maybe TBD 2024. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man TBD 2024. And Marvel Zombies... and Daredevil Born Again and Ironheart, all TBD stuff. Our roll call here, the director of this episode was Sydney Freeland, who has done, she's directed episodes of Grey's Anatomy, Fear the Walking Dead, Reservation Dogs, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, among other things. A crew of 4 writers on this episode, and I think maybe over the whole 5-episode run, I think they work on kind of all these. Marion Dare has her best known credit. She worked on a number of episodes of Better Call Saul. Joshua Feldman worked on a project called This Close. Stephen Judd worked on shows Zeke and Luther and Dark Winds. And Ken Christensen brings a little bit of the Marvel flair here, having worked on The Punisher and Happy and the animated series Spidey and His Amazing Friends, Spider-Man series. Our cast of characters here, starring Alakwa Cox as Maya Lopez, reprising the role she originated there in Hawkeye. We have Chaske Spencer as Henry Black Crow Lopez, the head of the skate rink. He's credited in Red Dead Revolver, the precursor to Red Dead Redemption, as well as he's in the Twilight films. He's in Jessica Jones as a completely different character, Blind Spot and The English. Tantu Cardinal is Chula, the grandmother that we see kind of at the beginning of this episode. Mm-hmm. She's probably best known from Dances with Wolves. She's also in a show Wind River, and she was in last year's Killers of the Flower Moon as well. Nice. Graham Greene as Scully, aka the grandfather character, also from Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
He's he has that face where I'm like, I recognize you. What do I recognize you from? And looking through his IMDb, I'm pretty sure I recognize him from Maverick because I watched that movie a lot as a kid.
I mean, he's been in so many things.
Yeah,
He's such a great actor. I love him.
Yeah, he's also in The Green Mile and also Wind River. Devery Jacobs is Bonnie. We don't get a ton of her in this, apart from like, oh, we see her playing basketball at the firehouse. But she was also in Reservation Dogs, as well as we talked about this in the What If episode, where she plays the Katari character, I believe, in What If. She voiced that character.
Oh, that's awesome.
Who is a different character than Bonnie here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah.
But yeah, so cool little double duty in a 2-week span there. We have Azan McLarnon as William Lopez, the father, who's in Into the West, Bone Tomahawk. I recognize him from some really iconic episodes of Westworld.
Yeah.
He's in Doctor Sleep. He is returning to the role here that he played originally in Hawkeye. He's also in Reservation Dogs, and I pulled this one for you. He was in Castlevania Nocturne. Cameron?
Yes, he was. He's so good in Castlevania Nocturne. He plays an Aztec vampire who...
Oxel something.
Yeah, he's so cool and super gay. It's great.
Okay. We have Cody Lightning, Cody Lighting maybe Cody Lightning. I just mistyped it. As Biscuits, the cousin we don't get the young Biscuits of. This was a fun thing. Like as I was rewatching this, because I didn't piece together the first time I watched this a few weeks ago. I was kind of like half paying attention, half like falling asleep. So I didn't piece together that he was supposed to be at the playtime session at the beginning of the thing, but was sick. They talk about that kind of.
Yeah.
Like,
Biscuits is going to be so sad. He missed out on the camp out.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
He was in projects like Brick, Four Sheets to the Wind, Creators of the Moon, and Hey Victor. And then of course we have returning Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin / Wilson Fisk. With credits like Full Metal Jacket, Ed Wood, Men in Black, Law and Order: Criminal Intent, of course Daredevil, where he started playing Kingpin, and Hawkeye, where he returned to the role. A fun appearance that got you popped, Charlie Cox as Daredevil. I will always remember him from Stardust, one of my all-time favorite films. He's also in The Theory of Everything, of course, Daredevil in Daredevil, which he reprised then in Spider-Man No Way Home and She-Hulk. And then the last one I called out here is Darnell Bissaw, who plays Young Maya, which she is reprising from Hawkeye. So shout out to her, little actress. Some trivia here. This is the first MCU series to follow the binge release model similar to Netflix's, meaning the whole season will be released at once instead of the traditional cable-style weekly release strategy. Lockwood Cox is the first disabled actress to play a titular leading character in a Marvel Studios production. She was born deaf, just like the character in the original comics, and has a prosthetic leg. Hawkeye directing duo Burt and Bertie Elwood chose to not work on the series, saying, "We love the character of Echo, but the Native American story of Echo, in our opinion, should really be told by someone in that community." So shout out to them for recognizing that.
Yep, recognizing, hey, we don't have the chops to really tell the story.
Yeah. This is the first MCU TV series to be rated TVMA and to debut both on Hulu and Disney Plus simultaneously. And you asked about this last one when it popped up. This is the first series under the, quote, Marvel Spotlight banner for select series that focus more on, quote, grounded character-driven stories and less about impacting the larger MCU narrative. So... another pocket of MCU stuff. We had the Werewolf by Night and the Guardians Holiday Special that were like special presentations.
Yeah, that's what I thought this was. I thought this would just be a regular show, but Spotlight's a new thing, huh?
Yeah, Marvel Spotlight, a new thing in here that seems to be like, hey, this probably won't really weigh too heavily on the grander scheme of things, apparently.
Because when I popped up, my first thought was about like Searchlight Films, which was an old like 80s and 90s Fox
Searchlight.
Yeah, Fox Searchlight. That's it. Like basically the Fox putting out indie movies without too much of like a risk for them.
Yeah.
And so that immediately I thought, oh, okay, cool. This is going to be a very like not high budget. And then we were immediately treated to some blue screen shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like some serious blue screen shit.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of that in this. A lot of volume kind of stuff. But what did you think, Cam? How do you think this one holds up? Or I get, yeah, not how does it hold up? What did you think watching it for the first time?
I'm not too hot on it, but it's actually because I just don't know what this show is trying to be.
Okay.
I like it's set up.
I mean, you've seen about 20% of it, so
that's my concern. I understand, like, it feels, and I like, this is definitely a problem with me, and it's definitely a problem for me that I think I need to watch this show to get over. I do not have a lot of experience watching a lot of deaf content.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when it comes to performances, like, you and I both worked in theater, vocal performance is such an important part of that. And I feel like I am not feeling the impact of some of these scenes that are being very well acted, but I'm losing the energy and kind of like the importance in translation.
Interesting. Because I would of the two of us, I would expect you to be far more primed for this kind of thing, because obviously we went back and we're watching it with subtitles so we could follow along the conversation that's happening in the in the deaf scenes. And given your love of anime and how often
Subtitle
you
content,
watch
yeah.
stuff that is outside of our native language, it seems like this would just be another variation of that.
And the thing I think the problem is that even then, one of my favorite things about that is, like, over the years of watching a lot of subtitle content, whether it's in Japanese or other languages, is I love hearing kind of like the inflections and the different tones. And one of my, I enjoy sometimes rewatching a series that I've watched several times in its native language with an English dub, to see what the English dub brings to that. Like, how do you translate these tones? How do you translate the emotional impact and feel of a scene? Because there's a lot that can be undone depending on how that performance goes, or there can be elevated in some cases. I don't like this, and this is definitely a new thing for me. I've never watched a lot of deaf content, deaf characters in shows, sure. But this is a definitively they are showing this as a, hey, sign language is a language, and we're going to subtitle it for you, but you're not going to you're going to get scenes where it's just sign language.
Yeah.
And it I think if you want to compare that also to Hawkeye had these scenes, but they never were felt as if this was they were telling a deaf person's story. A deaf character was in the show. This is definitively, I feel and I shouldn't say definitive. I'm not deaf. I can't speak to that. But I feel like the lens that I'm seeing this through is through the lens of a deaf person. There's a lot of things that I would consider touchstones to entertainment and media that it's it absolutely is a privilege to be able to hear and to appreciate and accept those, and not just accept those things, but just enjoy those things. And I think that's something this is kind of one of those moments in my life where I have to kind of get off the privilege horse.
This is something I think, knowing how both you and I consume media, this isn't a thing you can be half watching and half scrolling through stuff on your phone. Because you will lose that if you're not looking at the screen. You'll miss the conversations that are happening via subtitles, and you'll be missing the inflection they have through their movements and through the way that they're signing and stuff like that.
I feel like there's another thing also is and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there's not a lot of strong music cues. And I also found that final scene in episode 1, I'm like, oh, this is the final scene. This is supposed to be the big reveal of what she's in town for and everything. And it is a matter, I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but is that just is that my privileged, my, so I've never said this before, but is that my hearing privileged, outlook? Is that my hearing privileged lens? And so I want to explore the rest of the series, really kind of deconstructing my own lens of like the way that I view things, and is a lot of times through hearing. And
Yeah,
is this an opportunity for me to deconstruct my own privilege to find a different way to find entertainment out of something? Because I don't think that this is bad acted. I think there's a lot of good acting in it. I think that there's a lot of solid like cinematography wise. I really like this. I really like the way that the camera kind of like will like let the kind of action and emotion of the characters leave the scene and linger. The lingering, I think, is really, really good in this show. The way that the camera lingers on some stuff gives kind of like a head, like a little bit of a tip of the hat, or a kind of like a show of the cards to, hey, this is where we're going next, but we're going to take a moment to get there. And this is kind of like telling you, hey, this is small town Oklahoma. This is native, large native population. Like there's something about this that feels very, very small town, rural America, but not the kind of like, not the atypical farm country white, rural America, which is a cool thing to see.
Yeah, or at least, I mean, I would submit that maybe it is, but we're focused on this population of that larger community.
Oh, for sure. I meant by the lens that they're showing it.
Yeah.
I eventually saw, I was like, oh, things are kind of, and my first thought was run down, but then I caught on. I was like, no, they're not run down. They're lived in.
Yeah,
it's lived in.
It's rural America. It's middle of the country. Yeah.
You don't like
the skate park kind of, or the skating rink.
The skating rink, but also like the buildings. They don't have like fresh coats of paint on them. But it's also not meant to be. It's worn. It's lived in.
Yeah.
And I there's something about that I really like as far as like the style of the show is going with. But I think on top of all of that, I'm really interested to see, because I thought to myself, man, I really just didn't feel like an impact in that final scene. And it's like, let's pump the privilege brakes a bit here and take a moment and think to myself,
define what you're talking about by the final scene?
Oh, the final scene I'm referring to is when they're on the water tower.
Okay.
And she's kind of like revealing to him, hey, this is why I'm in town. And he's like, I never saw you, like all this stuff. And I feel like it was supposed to have a much more emotional grip, because we're kind of like, when she's like, it's time for a queen, I'm like, oh, I thought you were just on the run. You're making a play here.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was supposed to be a bigger feeling of impact there. And I'm wondering, like, I kind of want to rewatch some of that scene. It's particularly that scene. And because I want to see if, it just doesn't have an impact. If that's the case, that's fine. But am I missing something is the thing.
I guess for me, I'm curious, like, I don't think that needs a musical flourish.
No, I don't need a musical flourish. I meant just overall the kind of atmosphere of that scene.
Okay.
Didn't feel right for me.
I'll give you, like, that scene feels the most blue screened of things, of like, okay, yeah, they're on a very small set and
I don't know. I think the whole origin story that they decided to start, like the like creation mythos story they started with.
Sure.
That's the most blue screen.
Yes, yeah. Yes, they didn't go into a mystical Native American creation world myth. So I'm actually, like, I strongly disagree, I think, on the sound design front. Like, I really like the sound design of this. In particular, I think there's a fun needle drop for, like, the fight sequence that we get in the warehouse, where,
for sure.
Obviously where she kind of, like, awakens.
Oh, I just meant for that one scene.
Okay.
I just mean that one scene. The rest of it, I think, is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I also like that a lot of the sound design of this deliberately is pulled out and puts us in her shoes, and we aren't hearing stuff. And it's very reminiscent of the Haley stuff from Marvel Spider-Man 2 last year, where, like, we got to play in her, we got to playing as that deaf character. We get to experience it in the way that they kind of experienced. Like, I love the way the subtitles kind of, like, describe what's happening, like when she's got that guy in a headlock and it's like two hearts beating. That's so cool. Spine snaps. One heart beating. It's like, that's a cool, like,
it's
especially because that's one thing that, like, I didn't. I wasn't able to hear or focus on if I didn't have like the sound up very high, or if I'm not like listening to it on headphones or something like that. I'm not necessarily even going to catch that in the like emotion and franticness of the scene. I'm not going to hear boom, 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 boom. Obviously you hear the crack, but then like the dropping out. So like even that is a thing that I appreciate, that the show's kind of giving me a little bit of like here's a way we're kind of signifying this.
I think that's all awesome. I was referencing just kind of like that last scene. I felt like that last scene should have been more important, and maybe it's just not. They just didn't do it that way.
I mean,
maybe that's fine.
I mean, like
maybe I'm reading too much into it. Imagine that, Trevor. Imagine that I read too much into something.
I would definitely say that in terms of like. Like realizing this is a 5-episode show, so it's shorter than pretty much any other Marvel show we get. And it did all drop on one day, and it's designed to be like, hey, we're not trying to set you up with a cliffhanger to wait for the next episode. It is like, okay, this is the end of that chapter. She is making a play for it, and he wants nothing to do with it. And it's like, we've never done, like, we haven't had this conversation. Obviously, yeah, it very much depends on necessarily how, like, it might not even be, I mean, like, it might just be, oh, you watch the second episode and realize, oh yeah, that's not like the climax of her story or anything like that. So, the thing that is the like the thing I'm kind of having to set aside in terms of like the realism of it is the idea, and maybe this also gets explained away over the course of the rest of the stuff, of everybody in this town, everybody she like needs to interact with in this town, knowing the sign language, even Biscuit, who she hasn't seen in 20 years. So like why does he continue to know that? Like, why did that kid continue to learn sign language, or why does he know that much sign language? But then there's also this this bit that I think is interesting, and I think there is an element of like, I don't see people having to kind of cross the language barrier, like actively cross the language barrier. Because it's the kind of thing like, oh, if I tried to have a conversation in Spanish with somebody, yeah, a lot of my time is going to be slowed down because I'm going to be thinking of what are the words I'm trying to say or something like that. And there is a like the conversations she has with other people, she's signing right along, and other people are very like it stilts their speech because they're signing slowly, picking the right words, identify like, and so there's like I like that, but then also there is like a weird like, does everybody really know that in this rural Oklahoma, community who maybe hasn't had a reason to need to know? Like, I get family, I get her father, I get the people who knew the mother, and maybe there is an element there of like the mother was in the community long enough, and a deaf person in the community, so enough of the community just kind of know that or learned it, that we don't get from just this first episode. But yeah, there is an interesting kind of flavor there too, and obviously it is you're making a show, you have to have characters be able to speak to one another, so yeah, she has to be able to communicate to them, they have to be able to communicate to her. I like, on the flip side, that there are characters that just don't know sign language. They're just like, all right, how are we going to do this? Let's here, I'm going to mime a gun. She probably picks that up. And obviously she, like, even the Fisk stuff of like, I loved him having an interpreter in the car with him, or at the dining room kind of scenes and stuff like that. Like, she's in the shadows, so she's not the focus or anything like that, but she's there to and those scenes end up flowing better, I think, or more naturally, because that's an expert who is that, being that like live translation, as opposed to somebody who's having to figure out on the spot, oh, I haven't used this language in 15 years, 20 years. Let me see if I can like pull out the simple structure that I need to communicate the bare essentials with this character. So yeah, I'm really enjoying those elements of it. I did appreciate just on a rewatch, I was catching just more things in general. Like I didn't catch the first time I was watching it. She goes, she bandages herself up and the gunshot wound and stuff, and then we cut back to her on the motorcycle, and you see like the blood that has been so like dripping down the motorcycle.
There's a lot of like, there's so many great moments that I think are part of that like overall set design or like directing choice. Costume design. There's a lot of really great things in this.
Yeah. So I'm like,
Also, shout out to her having like an actual infection in that scene with the mortician. Like, I freaking loved it. It was great.
yeah,
Because it's like, yeah, it would be infected by now. Because you just use like an Ace bandage wrap to keep yourself from bleeding out, and then you used mint flavored like dental floss.
Yep.
That was how old? Because nobody's been staying in that house apparently for a while. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Old dental floss, not going to be the best sutures.
Yeah. But worked in a pinch for her. So
yeah, it did.
Shout out to that. Yeah, I'm curious. I think they do a good job setting up in the very brief little bits we get, setting up like the relationship between her and Bonnie. And so I'm interested in seeing where that goes, especially presumably you have kind of this like opposite sides of the track or opposite sides of the law, somebody who's done the criminal lifestyle versus somebody who is a firefighter, and the distance that they've had. But still, I liked the shot of her at the cemetery with the text coming up from Bonnie of like, you don't have to go through this alone. So at least they've still been in touch. They've still been communicating. I like the guy at the end basically saying like, if you're here and you don't see her and she finds out, it will break her heart. Like I like clearly their friendship means something to other people too. And whatever Black Crow's past is with Maya and Bonnie and stuff. I like that there is like just an implied history and even like the banter and friendship kind of stuff they have of like, are you here to fix me up or put me in the ground? Let's start with fixing you up.
Yeah.
I like the introductions we're getting to a lot of the stuff here. I remember like when it got announced this was going to be a show and especially like when we started seeing stuff of like, Fisk back up despite being shot in the head point blank. And I know that that's a thing that happens to him in the comics and stuff. I'm definitely curious how he's going to fold back into the story, and be kind of that like, big bad for Maya, I think, and what that ends up being like. But I also love the other just not even subtle, but like the other examination items that we get of like, a fight between Daredevil and Echo, like you said, like a blind man versus a deaf woman. There's an interesting dichotomy.
There was a very fun. They never made it about the disabilities. They just made them about it's just a badass fight scene.
Yeah, even Fisk calls it out. Like none of my men have ever been able to handle themselves as well against him. Like it was a test for her. He kind of even frames it that way of like, how do you feel? Like did that work for you? And she's like, immensely, kind of thing. So I love especially putting this in the context of the Daredevil, the old Daredevil stuff of like, he's always been a thorn in Kingpin's side, and Kingpin has been like collecting tools against him, and Maya is one of those tools. So yeah, I'm more interested on this rewatch to actually sit down this weekend and be like, oh, I'm just gonna binge through the rest of the show and see what it's like. So yeah. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to add?
I think the only thing I'm gonna add is I'm very curious to see like where I end up on the series, because right now I'm kind of like, there's a lot about this that I'm loving. And I think it comes down to a lot of like really smart directing, really interesting writing, as far as like, it kind of kept me on a hook. I'm curious to see what is like, oh, she's making a move and she's making a play, but like, what does that mean in the bigger things? Like, we don't get a clear understanding of like where the Oklahoma, New York City connection is. Like, I'm very curious to see how they flesh that out. But then again, they only have like 4 more episodes? 5?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're going to go too deep into it or anything like that. But like for me, I got from this episode, okay, yeah, Fisk isn't just a New York thing. He has shipping across the country. He has trains that are, getting goods going through Oklahoma, and his network stretches out. Like, obviously we have the guy who's who is spraying the skates down.
Yep.
Is somehow tied. At least he's informed enough into the criminal underworld that he's reaching out about the bounty on the King Killer. So
that one
there's
I was
that there, and
I was confused about that until we saw the Fisk shipping, and then I'm like, okay, Fisk has a network here. It makes sense why he would have heard or seen something. Like he's like, you look familiar, but but how? And it's like, oh, okay, like they've been spreading her picture around. She's known.
Yeah, and there's all. I mean, yeah, the fact that like she's there asking Black Crow to basically betray Fisk. So I imagine like he's effectively like the to put it in like Yakuza terms or whatever. He's like the captain or the lieutenant in that in that area. And so he mentions that like the skate guy does work for him and stuff. Both here and outside, the extracurricular stuff. So he seems to be like kind of the lower level like head of that section of the Enterprise, and Maya is going to him because of that like past and relationship, and so I'll be curious to see where that goes. I don't think I don't think they're going to go too deep down that rabbit hole, and it will be probably like surface level of like she's trying to disrupt or take over Kingpin stuff. I like that it comes across to me as realistic in terms of like, oh yeah, he of course Kingpin would be preying on the the rural middle America kind of. I mean, I think back to the road trip I did to St. Louis last year, and like going through New Mexico, going through Oklahoma even, and just like the parts of those towns, like so much of those towns were just dying, and the things that were like thriving were the marijuana shops, or the dispensaries and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, what a sad commentary / state of affairs that a lot of those kind of cities are dealing with, and it is a very real. I mean, I think back on like Night in the Woods and how that as a game opened my eyes up to like, oh yeah, this is why such a large vocal portion of the country is so disenfranchised and feels so left behind and feels so lost, is because
they happened.
That's exactly what's happening in those communities.
And a magic orange man comes to town and tells them, "I can solve all your problems," and they're like, "Well, okay," because who we normally support doesn't seem to be doing anything. And it makes sense why this happens. I'll think
make America skate again.
Yeah, make America skate again. There's something about that. Like I remember, because the first time I ever really thought about this and heard anybody talk about this was actually like a 2012 like cracked.com article where a guy from a small town wrote about, he goes, you people in this, like people in cities don't understand what's actually happening to rural America. Mm-hmm. And this is what's really happening. And it's like, people only really care about food on the table, a roof over your head. Everything else is like, anything extra is gravy. And what does that mean for your priorities? Like, where does that skew? Like, you're not thinking about other people when you feel like you're on the ropes. And it really comes down to just that. And I think that is it's a massive commentary on the state of where America is as far as rural America is. Now, yeah, that it's just 100%.
Yeah. So I like very much that this like immediately takes us outside of New York. I'll be very curious, especially like it was fascinating watching you watch it, the beginning of the episode, of being like, what the hell is this? Is this the show? And then you coming around being like, oh, is this their creation myth kind of thing? Oh, that's really cool.
I shouldn't say creation. I shouldn't have said creation myth. It is their creation story.
Yes. Yeah.
To be respectful, granted, like I call all creation stories creation myths because that's what I think.
Yeah.
But to be properly to honor creation stories of other people's backgrounds and origins, it's important to recognize that. That being said, I was really blown. I was like, oh, this is cool. What a cool way to introduce. And then it's like it's actually a puppet, like a light show, a shadow puppet show.
Yeah.
That the kids are doing in the tent, and I'm like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
But it did make me think. I'm like, I did not think Echo was going to be cosmic related.
Yeah. I'm particularly curious how that's going to play into the larger story.
Because she did have like a dream.
Yeah, she has like that dream, that vision kind of thing. And so, yeah, how are those threads going to like intersect and what's going to happen there?
We'll see. I'm curious to see where that all goes. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive into the report card then, where you grade from A+ to F. What do you want to grade this first episode of Echo, Cam?
I'm going to rate this my first ever incomplete. I'm not going to give this a grade until we finish it.
Okay. For me, the standalone episode, I give it a B. There are a lot of beats that I really enjoy, but I also can't, there is something to the fact that like I first watched this episode a few weeks ago and never felt immediately compelled to sit down and just watch the rest.
Yeah.
In the same way that like Percy Jackson, I was sitting down watching, week to week for a little while there, and then watching the rest of it kind of all in one sitting. Even the National Treasure show last year, I enjoyed that enough to sit down and watch it week to week. This, I had all of it there and available for me, that first day, and just didn't sit down and I was more than happy to be like, okay, yeah, let's talk about other things for this podcast, even week to week, before finally kind of coming around to this one now that there wasn't like a new thing to jump onto immediately. But yeah, there is a lot to like about it, especially like I liked upon a second watch, there was a lot of stuff that I caught that I did miss the first time around because of maybe, watching it kind of through groggy eyes or something that first time. But yeah, so a B from me. But yeah, maybe let's plan on sitting down, watching the rest of this weekend, and doing kind of the full season for next week's episode.
Sounds good to me.
Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. You'll have, of course, Hawkeye, as well as a lot of the Netflix stuff. You got Daredevil, you got Jessica Jones, you got Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, The Punisher, and then back to Disney Plus MCU stuff of Loki as the last recommendation there. Extracurriculars, watch anything else on Disney Plus there, Cam?
No, this was like the latest thing. Just finished watching Percy Jackson. Nothing else yet. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Cam, for sitting down and joining me for this first episode of Echo. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, we just had an awesome episode of That Nerdy Site Show this past week, where we got to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as well as Trevor got to go on a soliloquy of about Dondoku Island.
Yep.
Did I pronounce that correctly this time?
Yeah.
Okay. Of Dondoku Island, and like all the fun things he's been doing there.
Yep.
So.
Cool. Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to that episode of That Nerdy Site Show, you can find more of my Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth thoughts as I'm playing through the main story stuff in my Let's Plays on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So yeah, go check out all that stuff. I've recorded like 18 episodes so far now as of this, and I think like 6 are up. So there's definitely plenty more to come in the weeks ahead. So definitely enjoy all of that. Follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, review, rate, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.